from Chatham, Kent, Ontario. Paul works in a greenhouses and Jessica works in education. They have 3 children, aged 20, 17, and 14. A 90-pound dog and a cat that thinks it's a dog. They enjoy sports, camping, and fostering dogs from their local shelter. They are here tonight to share what they have experienced with an RES Samsung wind project that is being developed in their area. Please welcome the Brooks family.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. We brought you some snow from Canada. You're welcome. We brought our host family maple syrup, so we thought we'd bring you all something else as well. So thanks for having us. We are from Chatham, Kent, and we are in a brand new wind farm that was just built last summer. It kind of got finished building around Christmas time. It should be operational by the end of this month. So we'll just let you know a little bit about what we've been doing, what's happened to us, and some things that maybe you want to look out for, think about as you move forward with your planning and projects here. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're from Chatham, Kent. That's about an hour east of the Detroit River. Yes, it is east. There are borders in Canada that go north-south. So the Detroit River is one of those borders, so you actually go east-west when you cross the border, which we did this morning. Next slide, please. So what is our issue? Our issue is the North Kent 1 wind project. So all of this, I don't know if you can see this very well, but in the, sorry, my tether. All these red dots are wind turbines. I don't know if you can see that. That's what's there already. This county has over 700 wind turbines in it already. It's a very large county. It's rural, it's very sparsely populated. But this is the wind turbine. So I've talked to a few people that says, oh, I've been to Kitchener, I've been to Toronto, I've been here. If you've driven from Detroit up the 401, this is what you get to see, all the flashing, blinking lights. It's beautiful. So here's the township of Chatham. This is all Chatham, Kent, big amalgamated project. This is the Dover, I'm going to talk about Dover Township project, and that's important because it happened first. Then we're happening, North Kent, and then there's another project up here called Otter Creek that's supposed to start this summer. So I'm going to kind of talk about what's happening with all of that and why it's important. Next slide. So our biggest issue is pile driving. I understand that you don't really know how the construction projects is supposed to come, but in our area, pile driving was our biggest fear and our worst nightmare. Pile driving literally it's like a giant hammer. I couldn't get the video to link, but it's just this clang, clang, clang. You're talking about decibel noise. Goodness sake, at one point I had one on either side of me going. These were the pile drivers. I had 3. This was at the same time surrounding my house. So this one, they're all within a kilometer. Sorry, I'm Canadian and everything I'll say is metric, so if somebody can interpret for me, that'd be great. So these are all within a kilometer of my house. The one that's impacting us the most is 750 meters away. In Ontario, it was neat to hear that you can pick your own offsets. In Ontario, it's a standardized 550 meters. It's just standard across Ontario and there's nothing you can do about it. Next slide. Why is pile driving an issue? Because we're worried about vibration damage. And we know that it happens, because it happened in that Dover, in that Mitchell's Bay project, that first project. So what happens is when they drive down into the aquifer, into the land, our aquifer is very shallow. So it's important that you understand your geology. Our aquifer is very, very shallow. My well is only 62 feet deep, or our well is 62 feet deep, mine. And the piles go down 60 to 70 feet, depending on where the bedrock is underneath the wind turbine. They put about 18 piles per turbine. So around my immediate home, there's about 6. So you do the math. I can't. 18 times 6. But that's a lot of piles driven down through the aquifer. And what happens is it hits the black shale. For us, our geological formation that scares us is this black shale underneath. Black shale is a natural occurring bedrock, but what we do know is that it is a human health hazard. It contains arsenic, radon, lead, mercury, radiant material, heavy metals, and then when you ingest it, the acids in your stomach break down those bonds, and then those things are now freely floating around in your system, small enough to be absorbed by your cells. So it's something you really don't want to swallow. So this is our issue. Now, people will say, how come not all the wells have gone bad? Because our neighbor's well, as far as we know, is fine. He hasn't done particle testing yet, so maybe it's not fine, but it looks fine. And our geologist said, think about when you throw a handful of stones into a pond, and the ripples come out, and where the ripples meet each other, it's quite turbulent. It's the same idea. So for us, we had those two pile drivers going at the same time, and they were kind of equidistant from our house, so our geologist said, they probably were smashing underneath your house, and that's why you've got such crappy water. So this is what happens. So, next slide. So, we are worried about this Kettle Point Black Shale. This is this dark green formation here. This is Chatham Township right here. Our geologist said there should never be pile driving here because about 1/3 of the people in this county rely on the groundwater. The municipal water is taken out of the Lake St. Clair, the little one here, or out of Lake Erie. So, but the rest of us get our water from the ground. And in Canada, there's very little protection for groundwater. So, next slide. So this is what happened. And this is the project boundary. Each one of those black squares is a turbine. Each one of those red dots was the beginning of the damage. That's the first 14 wells. There's now officially 18. We know there's more, but there's reasons people don't talk, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But so this is our house. This is the turbine that's 750 meters away from us, and this is our neighborhood now. These all went up this summer, not much to our chagrin. So. What's interesting is ours was the first, so they started the project here, and they moved their way north, and at each concession where they started pile driving, those were the wells that went bad. We've actually mapped it out using some software, and you put it over time lapse. Again, I couldn't get it to load, but as the pylons were going up, the wells went down. It was just a wave pattern. So, okay, next. And so this is some of our water. Paul's got another sample there. I don't know. Why don't you start passing around? People can look at it. What you'll see in it is little black bits, and that's the black shale. The stuff we can see, actually, we're not too scared about because it looks gross. But you can actually filter that out. It's the stuff you can't see that can't be filtered out that can be absorbed by your cells, and that's what's freaking us out. So this is our neighbors to the north, the Pumphreys. They've got 3 boys under 6. That's what they're supposed to feed their kids. This is another neighbor who, because of the way that his water's set up, he has to use this water to flush his toilet, so that's what the toilet looks like. So, and this is one of our samples that happened right after construction. So people said, when did it happen? We had water that looked like this. The geologist said our water was so good we could have bottled it. We did pre-construction testing because we knew this was coming. And it was this clear, it was this good, on a Wednesday. On a Thursday, they started pile driving. By Friday night, my husband was trying to take a shower, and the water quit because the sediments were so thick, it clogged the water coming into the house. Next slide. So, because of that, we had already put in the permit conditions, and it's all government stuff, and it's going to be different here than at our place. But one of the things we were able to get put into the condition requirements was if there was any well interference, that the wind company was going to provide us with water until it was sorted out. And it was sort of left very open. So this is our tank. So imagine a milk truck. We tarped it in the summer to keep the sun off, so the algae wouldn't grow in it. Most of our neighbors got these little ag tanks that the water in it's not potable, so they have to have bottled water to drink in the house. So look, that's what you have. So what happened is we went away for New Year's weekend, and I don't know if you remember over New Year's, it was really cold. It was minus 30 Celsius, which I don't care what degrees you're using, that's cold. We had somebody watching the house. We kept the water running, like we kept a trickle going. We had somebody coming in to feed the cat and take care, keep an eye on the place. They called us New Year's Eve. The water stopped working. There's no water running. Oh, shoot. Well, it's already New Year's Eve. Can't start driving now. So we just left the next morning, came home to this. I don't know if you can see this. This tank was about 2/3 full. It's frozen solid. It was frozen solid when we got home from our cottage trip. And so we had to live for about 24 hours till the water company could come in. They finally defrosted us and we got the water running again. So now inside the tank we have a heater. So imagine those heaters that go like in a horse trough. We have one of those in there. And that's what keeps us melting. But we have to pay the hydro for that. So that's what we're up to. All right, so the latest news that came out 2 weeks ago was that finally, so this happened with us over the August long weekend. Oh no, what is the first weekend of August? In Ontario it's a holiday, so we always talk about the August long weekend. So it's the first weekend of August that this happened to us. And the governing body for our renewable energy projects in Ontario is our Ministry of the Environment. Actually, it's the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change. And they came out and they said, oh, finally, after 7 months, we've decided that the wind farm didn't cause this damage. So our government is now coming out to say, you can go back on your well, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, and anything that is wrong with it, well, it was already either bad before, or you had bad equipment, or you're a bad person because you didn't take care of your well, but it's not our fault, okay? You talk to the well diggers in the area, if one well goes bad in Chatham Township, that's bizarre. 18 went bad in one summer, that's officially, and there's probably more. Well, we know there's more. So that's Lucy Defray over there. She's another one of our neighbors. She speaks French, so our French CBC is following her because she can actually speak it well. I don't. And then so we're getting out there. CBC is a national level news source, so we're getting there. We're getting our story out farther than just our local media. Next page. So, what did we do to prepare? I'm trying not to give you too much history and too much detail, but I do want to just tell you what did we do to get ready for them coming in. It sounds like your processes are a little bit different. In Ontario, we have something called the Renewable Energy Act, and it basically just plows in renewable energy projects. It doesn't matter if you're a willing host or not. So if you're an unwilling host, you get them anyway. So we have to, and the Renewable Energy Act supersedes 21 other pieces of legislation. So the one piece of legislation that it doesn't supersede is a health one. So we're right now calling for a health hazard investigation to tell me that that bottle of water is safe to drink. I mean, if anybody with a brain knows you can't drink that, but we want a health hazard investigation. So we're trying to slow things down. So to prepare for it, we did go through a Renewable Energy Act tribunal and a number of other things. So I'll just go through this. So this is some things we did to prepare. This is Kevin Jackieback. Anybody following our story through social media will recognize his face. He's shaved his beard to try to change his appearance because people keep following him. But he is our spokesperson for our group and has done a lot of the science for us. He's a local farmer, and he was the one that linked the damage in Dover Township with all these wells going bad. And as farmers, if your well goes bad, it's not something you proclaim to people. Like you kind of, we're going to try to fix this, and and please, well digger, can you come in the dark of night so nobody sees you working? Nobody wants to know that you've got bad water. So it took a while for the word to get out that there was bad water in Dover. When Kevin found this out, he started a campaign. So what did we do? He started with public meetings to inform the residents of the potential threat. We had gone to the meetings of RES, and Pattern, Samsung. So this is how it works. So Samsung is financing Pattern Energy out of Texas. So for us, it's all offshore. It's all offshore, out-of-country companies. There's no Canadian companies working on this. Pattern Energy is the developer. RES is one of the contractors. So we're it's got a little bit different flavor, but it's the same. They have the same tactics, same things. So we started with public meetings and let everybody know, so stuff like this. We did media campaigns. You're doing the same thing. It's great. So that's how I found you. You found us on social media. So that was great. Did a lot of financial drives to cover costs, as you're doing as well. Legal is expensive, and we've spent a lot of money. We've been to court once already. We've also spent money on lab testing. There's some very expensive tests. One of them was about 700 American. So for us, that's over 1,000 once you convert it. And there was one test, we were tanked, we were out of money, we couldn't do it anymore. So somebody donated money so we could get another pre-test of the construction, or pre-construction data about our water. We've done advertising, and we've covering just operational costs. Like this is expensive. Like, so none of it is to gain back time. Again, we're not being paid to be here. We just like driving around Indiana in the middle of a snowstorm. So we are well recognized in our community now. These shirts, we're trying to stay positive. We're trying to keep our message focused on pro-water. In Canada, we're a bunch of liberal socialists, right? We're all so wind energy, green energy is, like, if you sound anti-wind, you must be a terrible, awful conservative. You must be. So we had to keep the message positive, and we had to keep it on point about water. We could do noise, flicker, bats and birds and all that stuff, but we didn't have enough resources, and we knew that you can measure water. It's harder to measure noise. Does noise bug you? Well, some noise bugs some people, some noise doesn't bug other people, right? You saw that, some people don't mind, and some people do mind, and I don't care, so those things though decibels are easy to measure, impact on people is a little harder, but water is very measurable, so that's why we stuck with it, and we knew that the water was going to go bad because of the way our aquifer was structured. So, did lots of campaigning. Looks like you guys are doing the same thing. I like your yellow stuff. We went white and blue because we're water. So, yeah, next slide. So before construction started, we tested our baselines. We got an accredited hydrologist. He's out of Kitchener, which is another 2 hours east of us yet. He followed the appropriate chain of custody protocols, so his findings will stand up in court. We wanted to make sure that was true. So I couldn't go get a sample out of my tap like you do for public health, and you take it to get it tested, because, well, you could have put ditch water in there for all we know, right? So we had to have somebody come in, and it's expensive. The guy was giving us a break, but he still has to be paid. So we tested for turbidity, which is the cloudiness, and we did a full chemical spectrum. And again, a hydrologist will know what to test for. And then we actually did a particle count and identification, because we had to prove that there was black shale in the water. We also did radon baseline. Anybody know anything about radon? How do you get rid of radon out of water? You shake it. So if you've got these piles in the ground, so not only is piles being driven down, but once the wind turbine goes operational, it continues to vibrate down through the piles. So it will keep the water nice and black, and it will pull any radon out if you already have issues with radon. I don't know if that's an issue around here. We did pre-testing. We were okay pre-testing. We've got a sniffer down there now that seems to be holding its own at safe levels, but we'll keep an eye on that. But again, you need your baselines. You need to have your baselines. Okay. So we called for a Renewable Energy Act tribunal, which allows citizens who have concerns about a Renewable Energy Act to meet. They're pretty much pointless because they're going to do it anyway. But we were able to meet with the Ministry of the Environment to talk about our wind farm. Next one. So we asked that the piles be screwed in instead of driven. That was rejected. We asked that the vibration mitigating equipment be put in. There's stuff you can put in the piles. There's stuff you can put in the tower. They look like the things in grandfather clocks that offset the vibrations. We learned this from, this is like standard in Europe. That's how they build them. One of the things we do have in Canada, we do have quieter turbines, because if you've driven up the 401 out of Windsor, they're tipped. The blade is tipped at an angle to keep the blade away from the base, so you don't have as much whoosh. So ours are a little quieter. I haven't heard too many people complain too much about the noise. But it's still there. If you're close enough, it's still there. But we asked for vibration mitigating equipment. Those were both rejected because, poor Samsung couldn't pay all that money. Poor company. you know, all those TVs they sell. So those were rejected by our government, by the way. The government rejected them and said, no, Samsung gets to do whatever it wants. We did get groundwater protection granted, and this was a first in Canada. There has never been groundwater protection applied to a Renewable Energy Act project before. So what that gave provisions for was for the water tanks in case of any well interference. We didn't have to prove causation. Just if a well went bad within the project footprint, we got a water tank. So that's what happened. So what can you be prepared for? And I've heard some of it already, and I think you're getting ready. But I'm just going to reiterate: gag contracts are huge, and I'm assuming they're the same here. If you signed a lease for a turbine, or you want to sign a lease for a turbine, you will have a gag order placed on you. You will not be able to speak negatively about the company or any negative effects of the turbine on your land. You have to be happy, happy, clappy, clappy the whole time. Okay? So there's a gag order. And they'll come back after you, because this company's like Samsung, and they've got a lot of money. You're not going to be able to fight them. Be careful about accepting anything from the company. So that first project in Dover, the eastern project, sorry, the project on the east coast of Lake Sinclair, when the water went bad, the company swooped in and said, oh, well, we're going to be good neighbors, and we're going to get you a filtration system. And they got them quite expensive, like about $10,000 worth of filtration system per household to try to filter out that black stuff. But that came with a gag order. They signed a gag order. That's why nobody heard about the black water in Dover. Nobody heard about it, because all these people that accepted the filter had a gag order placed on them. So in our campaign, we only have about 5 people out of the Dover project that dare to speak, because they, for some reason, didn't end up signing a gag order. So they feel free to speak, but everybody else won't talk because of their gag order. So if you ever have any issues, go to your governing bodies, and I don't know how that works here. You would know better than I. But, you know, we were already, so we'll go to the company. No, no, no. I'm going straight to the Ministry of the Environment. I'm calling them up saying there's crap in my well. Okay? I'm reporting a well interference complaint. And I don't know how that works here, but you'll know how to do that. Next. And I've heard this already too. I've been speaking to some of you. Be prepared for divided community. And you know that. It's really upsetting. You've got people with the lease versus those who don't want it, people who agree with the leadership, and those who want to go on their own. We've had a lot of, I just found out that some of the people that I thought were our good neighbors and good friends, but have more money than the rest of us, have been backdoor dealing with the municipality to get water lines put in. And they've been backdoor dealing since last summer. And it's just so disappointing. And you run into them in the grocery store, and it's hard to say, hi, good morning, because you've been undercutting us. Come on. People who are pro-green energy without realizing the negative effects of industrial-sized turbines. And again, I've learned a lot, more than I ever want to know about these things. And there are these negative effects. And again, water's very visible. Be careful of people inserted in your community by the wind farm. This happens in Ontario all the time. In Ontario, there hasn't been a single anti-wind turbine group that has been successful because they get broken up by inserts, moles basically. So in our community, we were able to recognize somebody who signed a lease, wanted to get out of the lease, and we suspect got out of the lease by being a mole in our system. Because any time we would make a plan for something, all of a sudden the company would know about it. And so when we eliminated that person out of our circle, then suddenly our secrets or our plans were being kept to ourselves. So this happens. And it could be your neighbor, unfortunately. It's really sucky. Like, this divided community thing, I think, hurts me the worst. I just hate it. Be prepared for harassment, persistent phone calls. We get followed by private investigators. It's kind of fun. Not really. I went to the grocery store, and this big guy with a beard was behind me, and so that happens right in the grocery store. And then I went over to Walmart, and the same guy in the beard was following me. So I went to the ladies' lingerie section, figured he's not going to follow me there. Called Kevin and said, that guy that was following you, does he look like this? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, oh, good, he's following me now, good. Good. The private investigator drives by our house rather regularly. The kids used to get freaked out, now they just wave. He takes pictures, like when the tank froze, I emailed the company, by the way, tank's frozen, the water company's here fixing it, but FYI, it's frozen. Within 20 minutes of me sending that email, the private investigator drove up our road. So we live on, you gotta understand, we live on a dirt road. We have the only 4-door on the road, everybody else has trucks. So when another 4-door drives down the road, everybody knows who it is. So, Slander to the press. We have demanded an apology from the pattern vice president because he basically called us liars and said that we already had crappy water to begin with. He said that back in August. We've demanded a public apology. I've yet to get him. So he approached me at a meeting back in November. Was that the Paramore meeting? Back in November, he tried to approach me at one of their meetings, and he kind of, he came up to me, and I said, "Oh, have you come to me to apologize?" And he goes, "No," and I said, so you're going to have to, get a thick skin and just be a little tough about this. Harassment from your neighbors that want the turbines, right? If you're standing in the way of people who wanted the bucks, right? And online trolls, I mean, they're easy, you can just delete them. But it's tiring to read. Like, there's days I just don't even go online because I just get tired. I just don't even want to hear it anymore. Be prepared for court. So communicate via print and email if possible, and keep a record. Audio record phone calls, anytime you have an audio thing. I don't know how the rules work here in your state, but in Ontario, only 1/2 of the conversation needs to consent to be taped. So if I'm meeting with my counselor in my kitchen to talk about my water, I have my dictaphone stuff shoved in my pocket on record. Because I consent to be recorded. He doesn't have to be consent. So I don't know what your rules are, just make sure it's legal, whatever you do. Because it has to be admissible in court. So we make sure everything's recorded, keep good records, dates of activities, communications. We literally went around every day, 2 or 3 times a day, drove around the project and took pictures of the pile driving and the stages of construction. We have better records of their construction patterns than our Ministry of the Environment, who's supposed to oversee the project. And of course I have a lawyer. I've already heard you got one, and they're expensive, aren't they? So even Canadian ones are expensive. Next. Be prepared for setbacks. Things will come up that you didn't anticipate, and they set you back, like finding the mole, like finding your neighbors that are undercutting you that you thought were there. Just be ready for that and be mentally prepared for that, and have the people that you can count on. Be prepared for stress and frustration. There's nights we haven't slept. There's nights we've cried. There's nights we've just wanted to throw things out the window because we just felt so helpless with what was going on. But even with all that, there is a growing sense of community and purpose. I was talking to somebody that was saying, yeah, there's somebody that lives just a few doors down. I never met them until this whole thing. We had the same thing. We've met so many awesome, wonderful, wonderful people. Let your community know what's happening. Find your allies. Use local media and social media to get message out. So as the wells were going down, we had these out by the main highway, not the 401, the main highway up through the county, and we just kept changing the numbers as they changed. So there's more, like there's a couple of wells that 2 families live on one well, that's why those numbers are like that. We kept changing them, and then it was great, and the grocery store people were like, why, what, how many now? That's crazy, So we were doing these signs up all around town. Yeah. We have found allies. This is Maud Barlow. She's part of this she's a huge international water advocate. She's now come on board with us. Sorry, there we go. She's part of this group called Council of Canadians, which is a very social justice group in Canada that is helping protect water in Canada. So we're, for example, one of the things they're fighting, is the Nestle Water Company has been sucking billions of gallons of water out of an aquifer in central Ontario for literally pennies on the billions of gallons. Like it's crazy. So they've been advocating for that. These are 2 of our local Indigenous people that joined us at our blockade. We actually blockaded a construction site for 11 days. Who'd have thought? They are the water grandmothers, as they call it. So the local, just north of that first project is Walpole Island. That's a native reserve there. And yeah, they're all about protecting water as well. So we brought our native allies on board. And in Canada, we have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission started because the racism issue we have in Canada is with our native peoples. And we're trying to repair that and fix that. And so right now, anytime Indigenous people become involved in a project, everybody walks on eggshells. So it's kind of helpful. We've also had, like I said, local unions have been helpful because this is all about not privatizing energy. We don't like privatization of stuff in Canada. The NDP party in Ontario is basically the third party, if you will. They have come on side and they have been demanding a health hazard investigation for us, and Council of Canadians and Native people. So we've got lots of allies. So you have to know them and get them. Find your experts. Don't rely on the company for information. I just did a quick search, and here is your shale formation. So I don't know how that works here. You'll have to get your own geologists that know the area to know that better. So we personally, Water Wells First is our group, obviously. We have a hydrologist, we have a geologist, vibration mechanics specialist, turbine construction, the guy that's involved in turbine construction in Europe, and a toxicologist, because we're dealing with the black shale. Next. Be prepared for civil disobedience. Because this was being shoved down our throat, we got sick of it, and at the end of July, we sent out a Facebook notice that there was going to be something at another place, and then at 5 o'clock in the morning, we all swooped in before the construction guys got there, because we don't have to deal with that. 5 o'clock in the morning, we all swooped in, and we took over one of 34 construction sites and sat there for 11 days. It was kind of cool. Who'd have thought? Oh, we're all sitting around this fire going, some of these, crusty old farmers, and present company, anyway. Some of these guys are like, who'd have thought I'd be doing this in my 60s, 70s, 80s? We actually took some of our 40s, some of our more elder members. We chained to tractor weights. Can you go back a slide? Yes. This lady, this is Yvonne. She's hilarious. She's 90-something. Oh my gosh. And arthritis in every joint of her body. She is always there. She stayed chained to this weight all day. It was amazing. And see, this is a couple other more elderly farmers, and they just stayed there chained all day. It was a great press thing. And yeah, cops came and visited us, and yeah, next, so back. And so yeah, we blockaded this place. Next. That's our indigenous allies there sitting around. They created a sacred fire, put up some prayer poles that made it a native sacred place, which made it really difficult for anybody to come in and bulldoze us out of the way. Because in Canada, we were trying to be nice to our native people, so they don't bulldoze them down too much. So, water is political, okay? And I know things here politically are spectrum and wide, and it has nothing to do with if you're left or right or middle or where you are. It's not a partisan issue. Water is a public trust. So this is our mayor, and if I was showing this in Chatham, everybody's booing because nobody likes him. This is our chief medical officer, Dr. Colby. He's the one that said, "Oh, you can drink that stuff. It's like peach pits. It just goes into your system like a peach pit." No word of a lie. My other doctor friends just went when they heard that. So we're actually hoping to get him at the College of Physicians and Surgeons very soon. This is our premier. So she leads the party that leads the province. Again, I'm not going to give you a civics lesson of Canadian civics. But we actually met with her Thursday night. She had a town hall meeting in Windsor. And so we got to hang out with her for a bit and she can once again tell us how deeply concerned she is about groundwater protection. And maybe we'll talk to you next week, maybe. So we'll see. And then these are our two, this is Kevin again with our two area members of parliament. We're a conservative riding right now, but the Liberals are in power for the province, so nothing happens. So, what we've done so far, so we've informed the community about what's happening. We've protested at municipal provincial offices, protested at construction sites, blockaded a construction site for 11 days, been to court as an injunction from that blockade, had numerous meetings with the wind company, actively sought out allies across our country, we've raised $500,000 already, this little community of ours. And we're pretty tapped out. We're getting tired. We did a lot of testing before and after construction. We wrote letters to various levels of government. We've held information booths at local festivals. We got these little postcards handed out with our contact information on it. So if you want one, you can have one. But we were handing these out at local festivals. We manage our media presence. We hold regular press conferences. So that picture of us standing in front of the tank was that was a press conference that we did about them attempting to pull our tanks out. And lots of meetings with allies. So we're busy. And what are we going to do? We keep working the press cycle, we keep raising money. We are very close to launching our legal routes. One of the things we're doing next week is meeting with the group that assesses your property for tax purposes. It's called MPAC. We're meeting with them next week to get our properties devalued to $1. So we'll pay taxes on $1. That's what we're hoping. It's not market value, but in Ontario you cannot sell a residential property without potable water on the property. So right now it is worth not even $1. It's worth nothing. So stay tuned. So follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. If you want to know the rest of our story, there's lots there, and our website. So if you want our contact information, I have some cards here. You can get on our websites and social media to follow our story and see what's going to happen next. I've been given permission to ask if anybody has questions specific to this project, not in general. Good. If you think of one, I will be available later. Oh, yeah?
How tall are the turbines?
Yes, we've got the middle one, the 550 foot. I think, yeah, 550 feet, not meters. That would be ridiculous. Yeah.
Have there been any well problems in non-shale areas?
Yes, I'm aware of issues up in an area called Kincardine, which is in northern Ontario. Their aquifer is on sand, and they did what they call a spread foot foundation, so not pile driving. And just that construction and operation of the turbines was enough to stir up the sand that made their wells difficult to use as well. So it's not just shale, but the problem with shale is that it's toxic, where sand is just makes it hard to use your water system. Good.
We'll be around.
Yeah, we'll be around after if you want have any more questions.
I'm going to preface with this next portion. I'm not a technology person, but I am the tech person. So we may have a few hiccups, and if we do, I apologize for that. Ruth Baker is going to share a personal story of somebody who could not come here physically. So she has prepared a letter and has sent some videos that she wants us to share with you guys, and we're going to do that at this point.
Brenda? You got to kink that cord.
Oh. Yeah. Brenda? No.
Keep kicking.
Brenda. Brenda DeLong is a resident of Ohio and lives in the footprint of an industrial wind project. She wanted to join us tonight to give you all the first-hand information of what it's like living 1,700 feet from wind turbines, but unfortunately, she was unable to make it. She sent us this letter along with videos of the shadow flicker and noise in her home and asked that we share it with you tonight. My name is Brenda DeLong and I live in VanWert County, Ohio, in the Blue Creek Wind Project. I built my home in 2004 on my parents' farmland. I believed I would live in the peaceful township where I was born and raised. Unfortunately, that all changed in 2011. I am one who loves to have my windows and doors open when the weather is nice, but those days are few and far between now. Let's just say my life has been disrupted because of wind. I knew wind was coming, but never could imagine the effects. Since I heard it was coming to my area, I drove to neighboring Paulding County and sat in my car along the road near a turbine and didn't hear too much noise. So I thought, those aren't too bad. Little did I know, listening to one for 5 minutes is nowhere near the experience of living with one day after day. The first thing I dealt with was huge poles and transmission lines that I had no idea were coming so close to me. I saw something going up to the west of me, but thought it was turbines. When they got directly across from my home, I decided to find out what was being built. The disgusting thing was, no one came to talk to me. Not the landowner, not the trustees, no one from wind. I had to go to them to find out what was happening. These poles and lines are 60 feet from my home, 2 feet from my property line. I have to mow under these and pray nothing happens when I'm under them. The lines are just enough distance off my property that I can't say they are trespassing. Around the poles are rocks that make it difficult to keep weeds and tall grass under control. If these were to topple, they would topple right on my home. I have 3 turbines close to me, each approximately 1,700 feet from my home. I can't see over 100 turbines. I can see over 100 turbines from my home. The red blinking lights are annoying. But those aren't the worst parts of the turbines surrounding you. The noise the turbines make is unbelievable. It is hard to describe the noise because there are different sounds depending on how windy it is on the time of day or time of year. I can hear the noise inside my home even with a TV or a radio playing. It is difficult to work outside or sit outside and enjoy a beautiful spring, summer, or fall day because of the noise. There can be clanking and clunking sounds. Some refer to the noise as a constant jet overhead. I have been told a semi or tractor noise is worse. That noise comes and goes. Turbine noise doesn't. I grew up on a dairy grain farm along a major highway. Lived 1/2 mile from a railroad. Lived on a road where dump trucks constantly traveled to a stone quarry and taught school. None of those are as deafening as turbines. I have experienced sleepless nights, heart palpitations, head pulses, and headaches. I know some who have had chest pains, migraines, and one felt his heart beating in rhythm to the turbine. These issues seem to disappear when traveling away from turbines. In 2016, there was a turbine less than 5 years old that had a whining, siren-like sound. This was not fixed for about 6 months. It didn't make the noise for the entire 6 months, but when it did, it was so unbearable. I had to leave my home several times. This was with windows and doors closed. The wind technicians heard another turbine and fixed that one, so it wasn't just one that was causing the issue. The same turbine started in whining again last summer. I had to call again to have it fixed. This turbine is approximately 1,700 feet from my home. There was signage, rope, and black heavy construction material left behind, not on my property, but just right off my property. No one from the wind company nor the landowner came to get it. I'm not sure how long it stayed until I eventually trashed it. Shadow flicker can be seen in my home in the mornings from the east and in the afternoon from the west. This lasts about 20 to 25 minutes at a time. I love to have curtains open, but it is impossible with the flicker. My neighbor has become nauseated with the flicker. We have been told to go into another room when it starts. Why should our lives be disrupted for their greed? I have standing water in the ditch in front of my home for days after a rain. Tile was broken and not replaced correctly. A drainage contractor that lives near me was noted as saying, "The wind companies don't know how to fix tile." The best days are when the turbines are not moving, but there are still some sounds. But what energy is being produced when on the hottest days of the summer, they are at a standstill? It is a peak demand day, but no energy is produced. There have been several cold days that they have stood at a standstill. My area has been without power for extended periods of time twice since wind came here. Once for 9 days and the other for 4 days. The turbines were running, but we did not receive any benefit from them. On several days when the wind was so strong, they continued to run with the noise deafening. Several weeks ago, with icing conditions, you couldn't bear it. Our community is being driven apart with wind. The pro-wind people continue to bully and harass community members who are against. They are forcing school boards and other authorities to make a stand, and when they don't, the local internet paper takes the pro-wind side and reports fake news. If there is anyone listening to this and you are undecided on wind, I invite you to my area. Don't stay for 5 or 10 minutes. You can't understand all the effects in that length of time. Listen to those who live around turbines. If they tell you turbines don't bother them, I am betting they are getting money from wind. Thank you for listening. Brenda DeLong.
Okay, so you guys could You could all see shadow flicker. You could not hear the two videos of the constant noise unless maybe you were really close up here. So at the end, if you want to come up and you want to listen to them, come on up. They are also all on Facebook, on social media, many different places, but those sounds are real. So at this time, we are going to have a question and answer session. I'm going to facilitate that. I'm going to ask the three of you to come forward as needed, all of you. Thanks. What is the impact and effect on radio communication, cellular, amateur radio? These are much taller than most cell phone towers. What are we going to see there?
Go ahead. Well, it's a complicated topic. Hello. I will tell you that in my particular area, we had a Christian television broadcaster who had a transmitter on the edge of our township, 600 feet tall. He paid for a very expensive signal interference study and showed he was going to lose 40% of his market from the turbines, and he mounted a vigorous opposition to the project. TV disruption is common. Wind companies will tell you that outright. Sometimes they will want to get you to sign a gag order and take Dish Network or something like that. Cell communication can be somewhat impacted, depends on the location. They do watch out. I mean, some radio communication is line of sight with directional antennas and transmitters and so forth. They know enough to stay out of those kinds of areas. The thing I heard when I talked to a number of people from VanWert County, particularly the farmers, who even the ones with leases, I was talking to a township trustee, he says, look, I got leases with Iberdrola, and he says, the thing I do not like about this at all is that it screws up my precision farming, screws up the GPS signals and so forth. So that's what I'm hearing from some of those folks.
Yeah, that's good.
Does eminent domain come into play here?
No. No, I know of no case in the United States where eminent domain has ever been used to site a wind project.
What about the right-of-way or easement? Roads, to how much are you paying per foot?
I have no answer to that. I don't know anything about that.
What happens when the units are decommissioned? Who holds the liability?
That's a good question. I mean, one of the oldest projects in Michigan is on its third or fourth owner since 2007. So I guess the first message I would say is the people that you're negotiating these projects with is almost certainly not going to be the people there when they tear them down. NextEra would be an exception. They seem to hold them for the duration. Detroit Edison does as well, a lot of reasons why, but a lot of them I see as no more than real estate speculators. They secure the easements, they secure the zoning, and they flip the things. So the thing is, the landowner is going to be stuck with the pedestals. And if you write zoning that says you have to remove the entire pedestal, the wind companies won't build. They just leave. That's been my experience. We suggest, and what I didn't talk about in my talk, is that you force the applicant to pay for you to hire an independent third-party engineer to assign a proper valuation for decommissioning the turbines, and then make the developer post a bond to make sure those things are deconstructed. Now let's say, well, you don't require that from any other building or any other type of structure. Well, yeah, but most of them, well, first of all, wind turbines are just a temporary structure. They have roughly a 20-year lifespan. And they're very expensive to remove. Some people will tell you they can be dropped with a few sticks of dynamite. You just loosen the bolts on one side, and they come down. I heard a guy, I don't know, they literally say this. I'm not just exaggerating. But the truth is the scrap value comes nowhere close to being able to remove them. And the estimates we see for decommissioning a single turbine run anywhere from $150,000 to $500,000 to get the things out of there. They got 30 to 40 tons of non-recyclable carbon fiber and fiberglass composite rotor blades. All those things have to be landfilled somewhere. And what leaseholders haven't figured out yet is turbine technology are growing so fast, is they say, oh, they're going to repower that old pedestal. No, 20 years from now, when turbines are 1,000 feet tall, you have that lease. They're moving over 100 feet in your same field. They're leaving that pedestal, and they're building an even bigger one for the next generation. They're not reusable. So 3 generations out, you could have a field full of these pedestals every 150 feet. You're only going to lose an acre to 3 acres right now. What happens at phase 2, phase 3?
Well, one of the things that Kevin hit on is that's one of the things you have local control over. you got to hold your elected officials' feet to the fire to make sure they negotiate a decommissioning agreement that is something that's going to protect your community, period. I know this, I know Brenda. I live about 10 miles outside of the project in VanWert County, and there's people up there, I know a lot of people up there that have the same exact complaints, but there's people up there that are getting paid that they have the same complaints too, but they can't say anything about it. I can tell you this, our decommissioning agreement is $5,000 a turbine in VanWert County, right now. That was negotiated by 3 old county commissioners that are long since retired that had no idea what they were doing. Now, we are on close to year 7 now, so at year 7 it's supposed to come back up for renegotiation with our new county commissioners, but what leverage do they really have? It's a one-time deal. I mean, the turbines are there, they're not going anywhere. The citizens hold no cards. So that's one of the things that you can empower your own community with, to put pressure on your elected officials and make sure that that decommissioning agreement is something that is going to absolutely protect you.
I want to interject at this point that some of these questions that I'm getting ready to ask, please understand that these men are not res employees. They're not elected officials in Cass County. And so their answers, they may not have an answer, or their answer may just be, we don't know that. Or they may speak from their experiences of what they've seen. So I just want to assure you guys, some of these questions are directly specific to res or to our county or whatever, and that answer may, res is not here to answer the question.
I'll just make something up then.
Does res have a security bond to pay a resident to dig a new well if there is contamination from a nearby turbine construction?
I have no idea. I don't think any of us do. I'm sure it would be the kind of thing you'd have to litigate privately.
And I want to point out, they got water tanks because that's something you guys fought for to make sure happened.
Yeah. But now they're going to take it away because
there's nothing wrong.
There's nothing wrong.
You can drink that. Yeah.
Who oversees the reconstruction of the roads?
Those are usually road agreements written with your road officials. In Michigan, we have both township authority and county authority over roads, but generally they have to negotiate road agreements. You need to be careful there. There can be substantial damages. And here's the thing, even if you have an entire county government, it's incredibly expensive to proactively take action to compel these companies to perform. We found that out in Mason County, Michigan. You remember I showed you the guy's house where they had to sleep in the basement. That county sued Consumers Energy, a Fortune 500 utility, to say you're out of compliance with our noise ordinance. I don't know that they finally did reach some kind of settlement, but it took years and many tens of thousands of dollars on the part of the county to take them to court to enforce that stuff. So you realize one of the big problems we have is this huge disparity between the entities involved. My township figured out through about a 1.5-year battle that once a wind project goes into effect in a small township anyways, where we have township level government, you don't have the financial means to ever enforce your ordinance. You'll go broke trying. If they sue you, you'll have liability insurance and insurance company lawyers. To proactively go after them, you'll go broke.
Some of the stories I can share on that is basically it's similar in VanWert County, Ohio. It's mainly our VanWert County engineer that does a lot of the RUMA agreements negotiated with the wind developers that we have coming in. But I can tell you this right now, that the agreement that they negotiated is not nearly enough, because they basically negotiated enough to get all the turbines up and none of them out. So the road agreement that we have in place has nothing to do with decommissioning right now. So if those things ever have to come back out, I can tell you who's probably going to be on the hook for that, and that's the VanWert County taxpayers.
Why do we have an ordinance with 1,000-foot setbacks from homes, but a half mile from the Wabash River?
Well, the river's more important, don't be silly.
What is the impact on wildlife?
That's a good question. First of all, the only protection the wildlife has in your community is what will be written into your ordinance. For instance, Fish and Wildlife Service told Heritage Sustainable. If you're wondering who Heritage is, how many of you watch the Curse of Oak Island reality TV show? Any of you ever seen that? That's the guy that owns the Heritage Wind Project in the Garden Peninsula, Marty Legina. or Laguna. He built 14 turbines despite Fish and Wildlife telling them don't build there because of migratory bird issues. They built anyways. They don't have the authority to compel people not to build. If you're worried about your wildlife impacts, it needs to be written into your county ordinance. You're the first line of defense for your wild species. Secondly, people say, what about birds? Well, house cats kill a lot more birds than wind turbines. All right. Well, first thing, house cats don't kill sandhill cranes, they don't kill bald eagles, they don't kill golden eagles, but they do kill cats. Secondly, Scientific American showed that the leading cause of bat deaths now is wind turbines. It's ahead of the white nose syndrome that some of you may have heard about. So here, I'm sure, because we had them in our county, the Indiana bat, which is an endangered species. It was funny, UV Wind, a German company that we don't see much anymore, they did mist netting where they look for bats near a woodlot, and so it's tiny, you know, like you imagine they catch birds in to study them. They put a mist net up for 24 hours, said, well, you don't have any bats here, we didn't catch any. Which was odd because Dr. Alan Kurta, who's a Midwest authority on bats from Eastern Michigan University, had just studied bats in that same township for like 4 years, and so that's what he wrote back. He said, no bats, what the hell did I study for the last 5 years? So again, I hate, you don't sound credible when you stand up and say you can't trust anything somebody else says, right? Because it sounds like you're lying or you're trying to just paint somebody with a starkly black brush. And I also will say not all wind companies are equal with this regard, but in the end, the only thing that they're concerned about is return on investment, and if you want to protect these things in your community, if it's not in your ordinance, they are not obligated to do it and are not likely to take those burdens on themselves.
One of the things I would suggest is Kathy Oldfather here. I think you have a veterinarian, Kathy Oldfather, in there in Miami County, and that is her kind of passion from what I've seen a lot of things that she's put out on Facebook, that she's really looking at the animal impacts and the wildlife impacts and things of that nature as well. So in my opinion, you have more of an expert who's really digging into that type of data that you would want to include in your wind orders here than we even have in VanWert, Ohio. So I would definitely hook up with Becky or Kirby out of the Miami group, and they can probably get you in touch with Dr. Oldfather on that.
I don't have any other questions. So at this time, I'm going to say, do the three of you have anything that you guys want to share that we don't feel like we've asked?
Sorry, I'll say a couple of things. Here's just some general things that I think are winning arguments. Kevin provides a ton of winning arguments. Trust me, that guy, he's the Jedi Master of, you know, all the things that I've tried to learn and who I've connected with. He's great. But one of the things that I think you can completely attack is definitely attack the safety manuals. There's a company called G-Cube that insures turbine manufacturers. And there is no way that these manufacturers are going to make these machines without sufficient liability clauses before they can even construct these things. So you got to press that angle like crazy, because they're going to try to bury it anyway. But you know, that's a winning argument. If they're not going to be able to share those types of things with you, that is absolutely ridiculous. That, you know, there are definite safety manuals out there, and it's provided mostly by the insurance industry for these manufacturers, so they're covering their own liability of getting sued by actually making wind turbines. So attack that like crazy. That's an angle I think you can easily attack. Kevin talked about the zoning issue. That's a winner for you guys. That's a winner for all of us fighting wind turbines. That I would ask them to provide you one example of any zoning in the United States of America that has language measuring any structure to a house instead of a property line other than citing wind turbines. Because I've asked that 5,000 times in 5,000 places, and I haven't had one pro-wind, pro-company, pro-anybody res give me an answer to that. Because that, in my opinion, and I'm not a zoning expert, my opinion is that because it doesn't exist. They're trying to do something, they're trying to make special land use like Kevin said, and there's no example of that other than wind turbines, period. So in my opinion, that is absolutely something that can be litigated. Now obviously you need money to litigate, but I think that's something you can completely sue on. Because I can tell you right now that the Ohio law right now is 1,125 feet to a property line, and the wind industry is clamoring that that's too restrictive. And it's not restrictive, it's just because people don't sign up their ground for it. They can't get enough support in the communities to get it. So we have one of our state senators that lives in the Cleveland area and owns the Cleveland Indians, He's not going to live anywhere near these things, and he's coming after us. So he's given us a whole 100 feet. He's going to make it 1,225 feet to our houses now, instead of 1,125 feet to our property line. So there's a significant motivation of a lot of people in the state of Ohio that have basically told a lot of our General Assembly that if you allow this to go through and the language is to a property, to somebody's house instead of a property line, we're going to sue the state of Ohio. We're going to sue the legislature for letting that happen, because there's no way they're going to be able to prove any other type of zoning language other than wind turbines for that type of thing. So those are the types of things, in my opinion, that are definitely winning arguments.
And I would add one other thought. These issues, there we go. These issues, as far as political, the expression of your political will, and again, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but is determined by your own willingness to knock on a door and talk to somebody you haven't met yet. Because you all are aware of this, but I can promise you, if you knock on every door in one township, you're going to find, even now, 40 to 50% of the people have no idea this is going on. I know, because I tell people all the time, if you're not knocking on doors, you're not making any points. And they say, well, everybody knows because we know everybody here. And then finally, after 6 months or a year, they finally start knocking. You know, we found so many people that don't even know. Well, that's right. Secondly, you are in a strong majority if you think this project is irresponsible. Strong majority, no question. We got the ballot results to demonstrate that. Finally, if you're an elected official, don't buy the lie that it's a small minority of people who are just whiny and cranky. The silent minority, or the vocal minority that we're defined as in Michigan all the time, has won every election since 2009. And that's gotten the attention of our state legislators. When those people in Huron County defeated Detroit Edison and NextEra, 64 to 36%, suddenly we had legislators who, of course, watch the polls very closely, saying, hey, can we come to your events and speak? We're running for office in your district. Suddenly we matter. Had we lost, even though they, in principle, agreed with us on renewable energy mandates, they stay far away from us because they keep looking at these polls that say people like the idea of renewable energy. Well, everybody does. I like the idea of renewable energy. It's a different question than saying, do you want your property donated to an out-of-state corporation to be used in uncompensated nuisance easement? Much different question.
Can I get clarification on one thing from you real quick? The first question about the radios, cell phones, TVs, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's correct to assume that it's not just convenience communications. It's also going to affect our 911 emergency services. We got a bus driver, they communicate with schools on the radio if there's an emergency, our law enforcement, our ambulances, our volunteer fire departments, that's all going to be affected with this.
It can be. It varies a lot with the frequency, the type of transmitters, the type of receivers, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want to claim that most all of you are going to have massive and profound signal interference issues. That's not the case, but you're right. My main point is, some people will say that we won't have any RF interference or something in their ordinance. It's got to be much broader language than that. That's the thing. You got to make sure that these guys are paid to look for loopholes in zoning ordinances. Every developer of every stripe is looking for that angle where I can get in somewhere. So if you don't spend the time and write something into that ordinance that makes sure that you're protecting those kinds of things, you have no case against them. It's very, very difficult. Secondly, they want you to write very permissive zoning, because then when one of you has a complaint and comes to the company, they say, well, your county had the ability to prescribe for us the bounds of health, safety, and welfare, and we meet those county requirements, so you can't make a claim against us. They want to transfer that question of whether or not this project is safe and operating safely back to your county government in the form of getting them to write zoning. That basically gets them off the hook in most cases. So, you know, I can't emphasize enough. Get experienced help if you're going to look at a zoning amendment. People who have been through this process before, because the loopholes are profound.
Hey, you talk about zoning. I mean, all this ground out here where they want to put them is zoned agricultural. So how do you move wind turbines into agricultural ground?
Kevin, will you please say the question?
Yes, the question is, the ground is zoned agricultural. How can we do what is basically an industrial use in an agricultural ground area? Well, it can only happen if you let it happen. Your zoning ordinances permitted that. In Kentucky, one of the counties I worked in down there, they said that you can have wind, but only in industrial zoned areas. And they picked a couple square miles and said that's where a wind turbine goes. Of course, NextEra and Duke wanted lots and lots of wind turbines, so that didn't work for them. Again, the land use decisions are up to you. Unless there's a state law that says wind, utility scale wind is a lawful use of ag ground, and I don't think that's the case in Indiana, but I would check with a local lawyer. It's a fair question. And, you know, out west, there's a lot more room. And the problem with wind, look, if you build a gas generator in a community, there's all kinds of technology that can be added to that plant to diminish the noise, diminish the appearance, and so forth. The only way to mitigate the noise effects and the other impacts of wind turbines is distance. You have to push them farther away from people's homes if you don't want to drive them crazy, because you can't put a muffler on them, you can't shield them, you can't put a big cage to catch them in case they catch fire. None of those things are viable. Well, that's not our problem. That's the technology they've chosen to deploy. Distance is the only way to mitigate those effects. You know, and the wind companies say, Kevin, what's it going to take? We need to build these things. Detroit Edison said that to me. We got a mandate. We have to build these things. What's your solution? I said, well, first you offer a buyout at full fair market value for anybody within the 40 decibel noise contour. Well, we'd have to buy a lot of houses and the price of wind would go up. Right. And that cost would be spread across all the ratepayers instead of just that small handful of people who are losing their amenity of life. Or secondly, take the entire tip of the thumb of Michigan by eminent domain, move all the human beings out and build wind turbines there until hell won't have it. Well, that would cost a lot of money too, and it's never going to happen. Right. You want me to eat the external costs of coal generation, spread across all the ratepayers? Good. Then all of us should share equally in the hardship of the external costs of wind. And the external costs of wind generation and noise pollution and visual blight are not trivial, and they are not zero.
She's going to share something. Yes. I don't know if the mic can get all the way through.
I think so.
Good. Just wondering, when you were talking about decommissioning, I don't know if you saw that on social media, but not too far from our house, we had one of those turbines do this. I don't know if you saw those pictures on social media. It looked like a straw bent in half. Actually, everybody tried to blame us, but there's no way we could have done that. But anyway, what happened, they don't know why it fell over, and that's only, that turbine's only 5 years old. It's a very young turbine. They don't know, they think a blade hit the upright during a windstorm, and that's why it twisted the way it did, because it was twisted 40 feet up in the air. Like, there's just no way any person could have done that. But what happened, if you drive by it, just reeks of chemicals. So now our Ministry of Environment has to come in and do basically a brownfield cleanup, and the turbine shattered, the blade shattered, so there are fragments of fiberglass all over this farmer's field, about 2 acres he's figured. So now he can't harvest out of that field because he's going to obviously scoop up the fiberglass. And so until that field is completely clean, he can't harvest out of that field. He can't plant in the field, he can't harvest out of that field. So you want decommissioning, but you also want a cleanup clause as well. What are they responsible for, how much, and what does it look like? Because those things stink. When they come down, the oil and the lubricants and the coolants and everything, it just reeks. It's gross.
I'm Craig Mossberg. I come from Fayette County. We're about 2 hours south of here. We're fighting NextEra Energy. It started out the Whitewater Wind Farm. After fighting, Rush County dropped out of it, Henry County dropped out of it, now Fayette County stuck with it. They changed the name to the West Fork Wind Farm. If you didn't know, when they change a name, they get new money to start up with. Also about she mentioned about flying debris. That was without a farmer in the field. Put a farmer in the field with a planter, a combine, and you're going to have a blade through your windshield, something in your back or something like that. They always say, if you look at the photos, it shows the cornfield with the parts in it. I mean, so if you got your corn planter out there and you're putting the corn out and you're harvesting, you're going to get hit. But they don't tell you that part out. Also, retardant Dow chemical. They decommission, they go 3 foot down, put soil down. Corn roots go down about 7 to 9 foot. So imagine when your corn root goes down 3 foot, that's one place it's going to go to and it'll stop. So your grandkids are going to ask you why that one big old circle out there won't grow corn, grandpa. So also stick together as the counties. Those as the counties sticking together, you can beat them. So I mean, right now we're fighting the transmission line, and that's all they need to get done in Fayette County. So NextEra's rough. If they lie, they will tell you their neighbor's going to sign up, which they don't. So never don't trust wind companies, they're evil, sorry.
Yes.
The issue of our airport base, which is in Miami County, what effect does the wind turbine farm had on, like, the Detroit airport, other major airports? And of course, the strategic Air Force base is a lot different from a municipal or a Detroit airport. What effects and what kind of permitting would you say is necessary?
What effects does the air base, airports, any of that have to do, and how does that impact?
700.
That's a good question. It came up in my township. FAA granted approval, so the FAA has to approve all these tall structures. They granted approval for all the turbines in my township and the neighboring township until 5 days before our referendum election, and my brother looked and said, hey, they wiped them all out. I said, well, what happened? And we looked at them. The FAA never looked across the state line, because we're right on the state line, to remind themselves that Toledo Express International Airport was like 9 miles south of the state line. They weren't taking into consideration. Suddenly the limit on turbine height got dropped from 500 to like 330, 320. And so, of course, the proponents accused us of having so much fossil fuel money, we were able to manipulate the FAA into rejecting us 5 days before the election. Well, I only wish that were true. None of you would be here today, right? So the impact of radar vectoring is real. And I have heard that there is some concern about the military base and the low-fly operations. I'm not going to pretend to know all about that, but talk to folks here. I'm sure they can fill you in. But the other thing is, the question that arose in our township is, what about private grass strips? You know, people who run their ultralights or small planes off their own home-based, landing strips. We had 3 of them in our township. Well, the one farmer said to the guy, he says, I don't care, I'm going to put a turbine right at the end of your runway. It's none of your business what I do on my property. What's my point? Unless it's a public strip, unless you make it open to the public, it's not subject to FAA. That doesn't mean that your county doesn't have the right to put zoning around your existing grass strips. They certainly do, and I certainly think they should. So, that's, I guess in a nutshell, that's what I know. But airports are very jealous of their airspace, and so in general, they're allies in this stuff. They don't want to see their airspace compromised, because there's lots of people that want to get in that space all the time, so it's jealously guarded. So I guess that's what I know about that.
And I'm just going to add, Tia Justice is in the back of the room saying, I'll talk about it. She will. She has spent a lot of time looking into that. I know that she shared at a Cass County Commissioners meeting a month ago, and that is on YouTube if you want to see that information. Or you could go ask her some questions, and she will share some knowledge that she's learned about that aspect. I saw a couple other hands. Yes?
Yes. Is there any chance this would affect the weather at all?
How does the possibility affect weather?
Well, it does on a microclimate scale. I'm not going to stand here and say that it makes a massive change, but I know we've seen some studies out of Texas that show perversely that the effective concentrations of wind turbines results in higher surface temperatures. So as they're attempting to reduce surface temperatures of the entire planet because they stir the air more and mix it and blend it, we actually see some localized effects where a cluster of wind turbines will raise the temperature ½ degree or something like that on average. Now whether or not it's a deal breaker, I'd argue that's a somewhat trivial effect, but it does happen.
Could you address real quickly crop dusting interference and lifeline helicopter interference?
That's a controversial issue. I have seen sworn testimony where both crop dusters and air rescue people have said it's a no-go. We don't want them. We're not going to come close to them. Others have said, I flew in Vietnam. I can land next to anything. So in my mind, the argument that I would lead with is the idea of trespass zoning. It can have an effect, certainly on these kinds of things, but as far as it being a game changer of an argument, I don't think it is. It's just all over the map.
The biggest problem with that is people don't want to speak publicly on it. There is a life flight helicopter pilot out of Fort Wayne Lutheran that will not say that publicly. He'll say behind closed doors that, yeah, we will not fly into the Blue Creek Wind Project. We're going to land right on the state line just before we get to Ohio, and they're going to have to cart somebody out via the roads, and then we'll will take them. That's been said to several people in my community, but the person will not go public. That's one of the other things that you're going to find right now is that, like for example, we just found out last week in VanWert that some legal counsel in the town, we don't know which lawyer it was actually going around to lenders basically advising them not to secure construction loans for people that are asking to construct anything on leased ground. So I'm like, well, that's great. Can we get you to say that publicly? Oh, no, we're not going to say that publicly because they don't want to lose their business because they know exactly how the wind industry is going to work. If they're going to come out and say things like that, they know how wind's going to treat their business. So I'm sure you got business members in this community that are doing the very same thing right now. They're keeping their trap shut because they know, you know what, if I say what I really believe, then that could hurt my business, and that's obviously going to hurt my wallet, and I got to feed my family as well. So that's the biggest problem that we've seen with that kind of thing in VanWert is just people don't want to stick their neck out and be honest.
And we've also seen that, like, if, let's say, a concrete contractor isn't paid for the turbine pedestal on your farm, they lien your farm. They don't put a lien on the company, they put a lien on your farm, and we've heard of stories where you can't get operating loans and stuff because there's these mechanics liens placed against your property for work performed by the wind company's contractors. Can't say it happens a lot, but it has happened.
Yes.
If the county officials are for this project and we're this far along in it and have a zoning ordinance that allows this, what other options do the citizens of this county have to stop a project like this at this stage?
So the question is, if county officials already support this, and what was the second part? If
we're this far along in the process.
So yeah, the first question is, are we too far along in the process in these two counties? And my understanding of Indiana law, and I called the municipal lawyer in the state who advised me on this, you'd want to double check it, but once an application is in place in Indiana and all parts of that application comply with the ordinance, it's too late. In Michigan, we have much more latitude because they have to have a building permit and actually have to start digging before, and then only then is it too late to amend the ordinance. But in Indiana, once the application has been approved and all parts are complied with, that's my understanding. So I would say it's not too late if those parts have not been complied with. Secondly, what I would encourage a county to do if you're not at that stage of the process is to adopt a moratorium for a year and a half. And a moratorium simply says, take no action, we're not going to take any permits or applications or make any progress at all with anybody who wants to build wind because we're busy revisiting our wind ordinance. That applies to any state in the union because that's a common law ability that you have through the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a constitutional right. And if you want to look that up, it's called Sierra versus Tahoe, and you can see that decision. So you can put a moratorium in place. How do you get your county officials to change their mind? I don't know. I will tell you that if they have wind leases, it's going to be near impossible. It's very, very difficult. It will. I want to be careful how I say this, but I will tell you it's been my experience going back to 2009 that unless they're very good county, and I don't even want to say that, most county officials want to take the path of least resistance politically. So if you're asking them to make a heroic or courageous stand that requires them to stick their necks out, the odds of you getting that are lower than if you can show them that your path forward is the path of least resistance. And that's just the way the political system works. If you're a strong, courageous person and willing to fight, you'll be alienated by your other board members most of the time. That's my experience. My point is this. Your guys' goal, if you want to see changes made to your ordinances, is to create an environment in which your commissioners finally realize the majority of the people in my community really do have valid concerns about that, and the path of least resistance for me is to help them move towards the agenda that they want here, or to get out of the way, one or the other. How you do that, I don't know, but I can tell you I always recommend people be civil, polite, and reasonable, because remember, those people have the power, all the power, and you need them to like you. They need to find you to be nice, warm, genuine human beings, and screaming at them in meetings doesn't help. But if they're all leased, and they're all being aggressive, and it's turned into a nasty, hostile environment, you can see actions up to and including civil disobedience are options available to you, but it would be shameful if it ever had to really come to that.
Would there be a time limit on the moratorium idea?
I think up to 3 years have been upheld, but you could do, well, you see a lot of times we'll do a 6-month moratorium, we'll take a look at it and reserve the option to extend. for another 6 or 12 months. I mean, as long as you're making reasonable progress towards, you know, a valid governmental concern, it's definitely something available to you. Yes, sir?
Who has the power to create the moratorium?
In Indiana, I would presume it would be your legislative body, the one with police powers, which is probably going to be your county commissioners. Yes, ma'am.
So in Miami County in December, there were 3 different constituents. One, a former commissioner that went before our county commissioners and asked and pleaded for a moratorium until this could be revisited. They claimed no authority. And
like
since
I
that's
said,
the planning commission.
it's Sierra versus Tahoe. You got to look it up. What happens in Michigan is municipal lawyers will say, well, I looked in the Michigan compiled laws and I don't see that authority spelled out in our state law. Well, it's not there. It's because it's a general law ability that you have litigated all the way to the Supreme Court. So that's why I'm quite confident you have that ability. If you have a municipal lawyer saying that that's something you can't do, check around, because I'm quite confident. Sierra versus Tahoe. Yes, sir. It would take a majority vote, you know, but again, I'm no lawyer and I'm not an Indiana law expert. Anybody else? Yes, sir, back here.
We quizzed him on the renewable funds. Probably quizzed him during the Biden administration. It's my understanding that he kind of reiterated that they're set to decline.
You mean the production tax credit is set to decline over time? That is correct. Yeah, it's going. So the question is, as the production tax credit, which is the major tax incentive that gets people to build wind turbines, as that declines, and it is phasing down, will that be an incentive for them to get out of wind? All I can say is historically, whenever the production tax credit has expired, wind has not been constructed in any meaningful amount. The wind industry will tell you that. And when it resumes, they go crazy and try and stick iron in the ground as fast as they can. So I guess that my thought is, in marginal wind regions like Ohio, Indiana, at least this side of Indiana, Michigan, etc., our wind is already quite expensive relative to western states. Add another $20 to $30 a megawatt hour to that, and it's going to be a bitter pill for people to want to swallow. So if you're asking me, is delay a reasonable strategy to try and get to the end of the production tax credit? Well, it's a strategy. Pardon? Oh, it dropped down again this year. The thing, it's complicated. I think by 2022, it's run out completely, but it's already dropped. But there's a trick where if you get a 5% safe harbor agreement and it has to commence construction, I mean, so they've gerrymandered the rules so it's not just so open and shut. It used to be, had to be in operation by the end of this year, you don't get it. Now you don't even have to start construction as long as you've reached the safe harbor of securing contracts that are irrevocable of 5% of the, you know, it's a whole trick. So anyways, that's why I can't speak with precision, but it is going down. It may be possible if you've procured some turbine parts and have the safe harbor, that it may still be possible to get some projects with 100% of the PTC in place. But if you haven't done that, your price is going to continue to go up. So this idea that wind energy is getting cheaper perpetually is not true, and as the PTC goes away, the prices will rise. And so it's already not very economical for a lot of reasons, but that's the bottom line.
We're going to take one more question.
One in
Denny?
the back.
Well,
oh, wait.
About schools,
Sorry.
we never talked anything about schools. We found out on the board that we had no vote on what we could do on ordinance, on the footage. It's up to the commissioners. And we wondering.
Well, I mean, the commissioners, in my understanding, have the authority for land use regulation and consultation with the planning board. So yeah, I don't know that schools have any trump cards that can be played there. Yeah, I think that's probably right. That's true in Michigan. All right, well, I would say, well, it's your meeting, but I would say that we would be glad, we'll take
I was going to say.
Go ahead.
I think that they will stay for a while and answer some questions, but for the sake of everybody's time and respect, I'm going to lose the microphone to one more person, and before I do that, I want to remind you of a couple things. If you have not signed the petition is in the back. You can only sign it one time, so you don't need to sign again, but if you are a Cass County landowner and have not signed the petition, it is in the back of the room, please sign it. Tuesday, there is a commissioners meeting, and I hate to say that everybody's on Facebook. If you are on Facebook and have not started following Cass County Property Rights, Miami County Property Rights, Clear Citizens, I mean, there are so many Facebook groups under the sun. Follow something, okay? And I'm losing the microphone. Yes? A landowner of Cass County or a citizen of Cass County. So in other words, if you rent in Cass County, you can still do it.
Can you explain the meaning of the petition? Most of us know it, but some may not.
Sorry, the petition, and that is confusing. The petition is to increase the setback. It is not to eliminate the project. It is not to cancel. It is to increase the setbacks from a property line, and that is the petition. Okay?
Go ahead and keep it. I'll use this without the microphone. I'm not going to be up here long. So I just want to introduce Ryan Browning. He's running for Cass County Commissioner this year. Ryan lives in the Climbers area. He is the chief of the borough's Liberty Township Volunteer Fire Department. He lives in the Climbers area with his wife Lori and 5 children. He's also served our country in the United States Marine Corps. And yes, absolutely. And he is also the president of the Marine Riders North Central Indiana, which is a 501c3 non-for-profit organization, and it raises funds to help veterans with PTSD. So, further ado, Ryan Browning, please.
All right, I want to keep this short. First of all, y'all need to know, I'm not a politician. I get up every day, I go to work. I was raised to know the difference between wrong and right. And when you do wrong, there's repercussions for that. As an elected official, you are a representative of the people that have elected you. I'm a fan of meetings like this. If you don't have meetings, you don't have question and answer sessions, you don't know what the people you represent are thinking. Second, along with that, when it comes time to vote, the vote you have to make may not be your personal belief, but you're there representing the people, and that is the way you vote. Commissioner Anderson, you still here? Thanks for coming tonight. Each county has 3 commissioners. You're the only one here tonight. I'm sure this is probably not an easy thing. Sit here and listen to all this. Probably not a popular person here tonight, but it says a lot that you are here. With that said, I also want you to know I'm greatly looking forward to working with you starting January 1st. I'm an open door. That's the way this government should be ran. My wife's already told me I'm on my phone way too much, but I've been meeting a whole lot of people and talking this week. I'm going to be around. Come meet me. Ask questions. There's papers on the back. If you want to sign up to help support this campaign, Bruce back there, we got a raffle fundraiser going to help. This isn't cheap to do, but sometimes you have to stand up and you have to do what's right at all costs, and that's getting elected. And as you did hear, it was mentioned earlier that sometimes commissioners want to take the easiest path. If you don't know something about Marines, we normally end up taking the hardest path. So when it comes to standing up for doing what's right, you do it, even if it makes you unpopular with others. Enough of that. Everybody have a good, safe trip home.
No.